Now it should be okay.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the presentation of commissioning as a quality-oriented process. We are here this afternoon going to present just a brief overview of what is the commissioning process in itself and how can it be used as a quality management tool. So if you look at this picture about some kind of window exchange in the building, I'll be back at that. I'll tell you about it later, what it is and how it's related to building commissioning and quality management. The next slide. Here is the learning objectives. What is it actually we're going to get through today? When we have finished, you should have a basic knowledge of the building commissioning process and quality incentives, and a little more about the international efforts that Anita was also talking about. So we have the agenda. Is there a need for it? Commissioning, what is it? What do we pay for it? And what is it worth? And again, the international efforts. To start with, if we take the view of quality management, quality of indoor climate, we can have a look at this chap. He looks quite happy because he's got 23 degrees Celsius and 600 ppm CO2. That's very nice for him. But it doesn't come by itself in a modern building. There's a lot of machinery to help him be happy. When we look at this one, you can see ventilation systems, you can see heating systems, and a lot of control systems to keep him happy in the room. But it's not done with that. To keep the systems happy, that keep the chap happy, there's a lot of other gear. Huge plants providing ventilation, heating, cooling, and whatever. The point here is that if only one of these machineries is actually failing, the happiness will also fail. So we need here to assure that all these installations, they work, and they don't just work each of them by themselves, they work together, they work as a combined system. But why should it be necessary to do something special for that? Why is it necessary to apply a quality-oriented process to assure quality across disciplines in the construction sector? Already now, design and construction is managed by very experienced people who have done this for years. But what happens during these years is actually that these specialists, they have a problem with cheap prices for design work, cheap prices for construction work. They work in their little box, each discipline by themselves. And if it's all the job is won by the lowest bid, they very often you see copy-paste designs and designs that actually maybe not be that individually aimed at the owner's project requirement as they should be. The commissioning process we can illustrate the commissioning process this way. Here we have a whole construction of a building. It's like a big cake, which is cut with a thick knife, and the thick knife leaves gaps between the disciplines, which results in a lot of coordination problems. The commissioning process is actually meant to close these gaps and work across the disciplines and work across all the phases of the construction. What can possibly go wrong? What is we actually going to aim our quality management at? The first thing to look at is the owner's project requirements. Because if the owner leaves us with some requirements which are too fluffy, which are not measurable, how then to measure them later on to see if they are actually in the design, in the construction, and the operations? We need to facilitate the owner to leave us with measurable requirements. The designers have to follow the requirements, and I say, why don't they do that? Probably also they will do as good as they can, but things happens. And there will be mistakes, faults, and whatever. And if you don't have an operational focused review, which is provided by the commissioning process or the commissioning authorities, then you could be in deep trouble if the not very operational design is built and you find out in the operations phase that it's actually you have a problem operating it. Again, in the construction phase, if the construction is not according to the design, then it doesn't matter if the design was according to the owner's project requirements. In the construction phase, we have a lot of cross-disciplinary issues because we have subcontractors of all different kinds, and there you see the gaps in the cake that we actually illustrated before. In the operations phase, things can also go wrong because if it's all built correctly, according to a design that's 100% correct, according to requirements that's actually very sharp, still, if the operations do not operate properly, you don't have your energy savings, you don't have your indoor climate, you actually have nothing. So you need to educate the owner's staff, facilities staff, and you need to assure good documentation. Again, many of these parties that actually are involved in the construction, they change during the phase shifts. And the commissioning process is actually going from the pre-design phase and all the way through to operations. And that means that we could help closing gaps when the phases shifts. Here is the description of the commissioning process, which is defined by the International Energy Agency in Annex 47. What we speak about today is what we call initial commissioning here, which is starting in the pre-design phase and going through all phases into operation. There are some variations. There are recommissioning, where they actually do it all one more time after some years. And there's retro-commissioning, where you take a building that has not been commissioned previously and try to do a commissioning process later on. This commissioning process for new construction, also mentioned by the IEA as initial commissioning, consists of owner's project requirements, which must be measurable in the pre-design phase. In the design phase, you make reviews, design reviews, operational focused design reviews to see if the requirements are followed. It consists of testing and training and assuring that the documentation is correct according to, again, the owner's project requirements. And then we continue the good work in the operations phase. So that means the owner's project requirements, they are the basis of all this through all the phases. Again, we follow up on issues when one phase is handed over to another. An example of a commissioning organization. Commissioning organization, here, what you should focus on here is actually that the commissioning provider is in charge of the commissioning steering group, and he works directly for the owner, not for the contractor, not for the design team, for the owner. There are a lot of other documents included in the commissioning process, and you can look at them here. Here they are related to each their activity. To assure that we can enforce all these cross-disciplinary checks, we often use the BMS system. But to do that, we need the BMS system to function in itself. So a prerequisite for the cross-disciplinary tests performed by the commissioning organization is actually that we have well-functioning deliveries in each discipline. That means each discipline should do his own quality assurance before we can start up with our cross-disciplinary tests. This is what commissioning is. Quality management based on life cycle costs instead of construction costs. It's independent of design and construction. And we work with operations, focus reviews, test of systems. And we actually, if you read in the bottom, facilitate open communication and dialogue between all parties. That's a very important thing. We are not the police telling people what's right and what's wrong. So commissioning is not just startup of technical installation. And it's not solving any kind of problem. It's definitely not a quick fix. And as I told you before, we don't act like the police. We have here an example of what it is worth. There's an investment. That's the blue line. You can see they have invested around 2 million Danish kroner in commissioning. And then already after the first years, the operations costs savings are 3 to 4 times that. If you take into account the indoor climate costs that they could have had if they had no commissioning, it will be much more. And indoor climate costs are related to loss of productivity due to bad indoor climate. There's an extra little on it, is that we have actually saved construction costs and design costs more than the value of the cost of the commissioning process itself. So that's upfront savings too. We have 2 shopping centers where you can actually see one shopping center was built with commissioning, the other one without commissioning, and we saved around 40% of the one with commissioning. And they were very similar, these 2 shopping centers. There's a report, and the report is mentioned here. You can actually download that report from our website. Done for the Danish Technological Institute, who will actually make these measurements. So commissioning is an investment. According to some US key figures, the investment pays back in 4 years. Our experience is that it pays back much, much quicker. Maybe in Europe we have much more expensive energy, and that means that we can save more money. Still, we have to need to use the tools that are there. And I look forward to hear Dan on the later presentation to see how his BIM model can actually make a collision test that will find this one. Internationally, a lot of people work with this. International Energy Agency has set the agenda for it, and then there's a lot of international standards and guidelines, and also sustainability certification programs working with commissioning. Quantum is actually what Stefan is going to talk a little about later. Then we have ICAR, ASHRAE, and SIPSE, who is actually trying to align all international commissioning terminology, and REVA is a review partner of this. ASHRAE itself is having a huge complex of commissioning standards and guidelines, and REVA have personnel who is actually participating in that work also. So now we are done. Everyone has done what they should, and this should be properly commissioned building, as you see. There was one thing I forgot. This picture. This is from a shopping center in the Copenhagen area, where they have forgot to make a design review, operational focused design review, and didn't find out that there was no crane could actually reach the windows on the roof. So they have a little extra cost every time they have to change a window. Thank you. And if you have any questions, the question and answer session will be right after this.